Book 4, chapters 6 to 9 of 10 books on architecture. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Fredrik Karlsson. 10 books on architecture by Vitruvius, translated by Morris Hickey Morgan. Chapter 6. The doorways of temples. 1. For the doorways of temples and their casings, the rules are as follows. First, determining of what styles they are to be. The styles of portals are Doric, Ionic, and Attic. In the Doric, the symmetrical proportions are distinguished by the following rules. Let the top of the corona, which is laid above the casing, be on a level with the tops of the capitals of the columns in the pronaos. The aperture of the doorway should be determined by dividing the height of the temple from floor to coffered ceiling into 3½ parts, and letting 2½ thereof constitute the height of the aperture of the folding doors. Let this in turn be divided into 12 parts, and let 5½ of these form the width of the bottom of the aperture. At the top, this width should be diminished, if the aperture is 16 feet in height, by 1/3 the width of the door jamb. If the aperture is from 16 to 25 feet, let the upper part of it be diminished by 1/4 of the jamb. If from 25 to 30 feet, let the top be diminished by 1/8 of the jamb. Other and higher apertures should, as it seems, have their sides perpendicular. 2. Further, the jambs themselves should be diminished at the top by 1/14 of their width. The height of the lintel should be equivalent to the width of the jambs at the top. Its cymatium ought to be 1/6 of the jamb, with a projection equivalent to its height. The style of carving of the cymatium with its astragal should be the Lesbian. Above the cymatium of the lintel, place the frieze of the doorway, of the same height as the lintel, and having a Doric cymatium and Lesbian astragal carved upon it. Let the corona and its cymatium at the top of all be carved without ornamentation, and have a projection equal to its height. To the right and left of the lintel, which rests upon the jambs, there are to be projections fashioned like projecting bases, and jointed to a nicety with the cymatium itself. 3. If the doorways are to be of the Ionic style, the height of the aperture should be reached in the same manner as in the Doric. Let its width be determined by dividing the height into 2½ parts, and letting one of them form the width at the bottom. The diminution should be the same as for Doric. The width of the faces of the jambs should be 1/14 of the height of the aperture, and the cymatium 1/6 of the width. Let the rest, excluding the cymatium, be divided into 12 parts. Let 3 of these compose the first fascia with its astragal, 4 the second, and 5 the third, the fascia with their astragals running side by side all around. 4. The cornices of Ionic doorways should be constructed in the same manner as those of Doric, in due proportions. The consoles, otherwise called brackets, carved at the right and left, should hang down to the level of the bottom of the lintel, exclusive of the leaf. Their width on the face should be 2/3 of the width of the jamb, but at the bottom 1/4 slenderer than above. Doors should be constructed with the hinge stiles 1/12 of the width of the whole aperture. The panels between 2 stiles should each occupy 3 of the 12 parts. 5. The rails will be apportioned thus. Divide the height into 5 parts, of which assign 2 to the upper portions and 3 to the lower. Above the center, place the middle rails, insert the others at the top and at the bottom. Let the height of a rail be 1/3 of the breadth of a panel, and its cymatium 1/6 of the rail. The width of the meeting stiles should be 1/2 the rail, and the covered joint 2/3 of the rail. The stiles toward the sides of the jambs should be 1/2 the rail. If the doors have folds in them, the height will remain as before, but the width should be double that of a single door. If the door is to have 4 folds, its height should be increased. 6. Attic doorways are built with the same proportions as Doric. Besides, there are fasciae running all around under the cymatia on the jambs, and a portion so as to be equal to 3/7 of a jamb, excluding the cymatium. The doors are without lattice work, are not double but have folds in them, and open outward. The laws which should govern the design of temples built in the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian styles have now, so far as I could arrive at them, been set forth according to what may be called the accepted methods. I shall next speak of the arrangements in the Tuscan style, showing how they should be treated. Chapter 7. Tuscan Temples. 1. The place where the temple is to be built having been divided on its length into 6 parts, deduct 1 and let the rest be given to its width. Then let the length be divided into 2 equal parts, of which let the inner be reserved a space for the cella, and the part next the front left for the arrangement of the columns. 2. Next let the width be divided into 10 parts. Of these, let 3 on the right and 3 on the left be given to the smaller cellae, or to the alae if there are to be alae, and the other 4 devoted to the middle of the temple. Let the space in front of the cellae, in the pronaos, be marked out for columns thus. The corner columns should be placed opposite the antae on the line of the outside walls, the 2 middle columns set out on the line of the walls which are between the antae and the middle of the temple, and through the middle, between the antae and the front columns, a second row arranged on the same lines. Let the thickness of the columns at the bottom be 1/7 of their height 1/3 of the width of the temple, and the diminution of a column at the top 1/4 of its thickness at the bottom. 3. The height of their bases should be 1/2 of that thickness. The plinth of their bases should be circular, and in height 1/2 the height of the bases, the torus above it and conge being of the same height as the plinth. The height of the capital is 1/2 of the thickness of a column. The abacus has a width equivalent to the thickness of the bottom of a column. Let the height of the capital be divided into 3 parts, and give 1 to the plinth, that is, the abacus, the second to the echinus, and the third to the necking with its conge. 4. Upon the columns lay the main beams, fastened together to a height commensurate with the requirements of the size of the building. These beams fastened together should be laid so as to be equivalent in thickness to the necking at the top of a column, and should be fastened together by means of dowels and dovetailed tenons in such a way that there shall be a space 2 fingers broad between them at the fastening. For if they touch one another, and so do not leave air holes and admit draughts of air to blow between them, they get heated and soon begin to rot. 5. Above the beams and walls let the mutules project to a distance equal to 1/4 of the height of a column, along the front of them nail casings. Above build the tympanum of the pediment either in masonry or in wood. The pediment with its ridgepole, principal rafters, and purlins are to be built in such a way that the eaves shall be equivalent to 1/3 of the completed roof. Chapter 8. Circular temples and other varieties. 1. There are also circular temples, some of which are constructed in monopteral form, surrounded by columns, but without a cella, while others are termed peripteral. Those that are without a cella have a raised platform and a flight of steps leading to it, 1/3 of the diameter of the temple. The columns upon the stylobates are constructed of a height equivalent to the diameter taken between the outer edges of the stylobate walls, and of a thickness equivalent to 1/10 of their height, including the capitals and bases. The architrave has the height of 1/2 of the thickness of a column. The frieze and the other parts placed above it are such as I have described in the 3rd book on the subject of symmetrical proportions. 2. But if such a temple is to be constructed in peripteral form, let 2 steps and then the stylobate be constructed below. Next, let the cella wall be set up, recessed with the stylobate above 1/5 of the breadth thereof, and let a place for folding doors be left in the middle to afford entrance. This cella, excluding its walls and the passage round the outside, should have a diameter equivalent to the height of a column above the stylobate. Let the columns round the cella be arranged in the symmetrical proportions just given. 3. The proportions of the roof in the centre should be such that the height of the rotunda, excluding the finial, is equivalent to 1/2 the diameter of the whole work. The finial, excluding its pyramidal base, should have the dimensions of the capital of a column. All the rest must be built in the symmetrical proportions described above. 4. There are also other kinds of temples constructed in the same symmetrical proportions and yet with a different kind of plan. For example, the temple of Castor in the district of Circus Flaminius, that of Vejovis between the 2 groves, and still more ingeniously the temple of Diana in her sacred grove, with columns added on the right and left at the flanks of the pronaos. Temples of this kind, like that of Castor in the Circus, were first built in Athens